So you've decided to get a pet chameleon. That's super exciting, and I can't wait for you to bring home your little guy. But first things first, we need to find a good breeder, and where you buy your chameleon from makes all the difference. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys some tips and tricks for how to find a good breeder. So if you're starting to research chameleons and you're looking at different places to buy from, you'll very quickly realize that there's tons of people that breed chameleons. But how do you figure out which one is a reputable breeder? Because not all breeders are created equal. So the first thing you're going to look for is the age of chameleons that they're selling. The golden rule is that you should buy a chameleon that is at least 3 months old. If you want to buy older than that, that's great, but that is the minimum. So if you're shopping around somewhere and they're offering hatchlings or babies that are less than 3 months old, that is a big red flag and you do not want to purchase from them. Anyone who knows anything about chameleons knows that a chameleon that is at least 3 months old has a much higher chance for success than, say, right out of the egg or a teeny tiny baby. So they're more established and are a little bit hardier than if they're brand new. Another thing that you're going to be looking for is, does the breeder know who the parents are? What is the lineage? What is the pedigree? What is the history, the genetics, the lines, the genes of the chameleon? And this is for multiple reasons. One, it'll give you some insight into what your chameleon looks like, because what the parents look like, they pass that down onto their kids, so it's a good indicator for the kinds of colors and patterns you can expect for your baby. But it also tells you whether or not the breeder is taking care of those adults, right? Are they the ones who are raising the parents, or are they just getting random wild-caught chameleons and then they're already gravid or pregnant and then they're popping out babies, right? So if you can see these are the parents, these are the grandparents, and these are the great-great-grandparents, like, then you're in a really good spot, because you know that this breeder has had multiple generations of healthy chameleons and they're able to have multiple bloodlines, which means you're going to have a healthy animal, because there's not going to be things like inbreeding, which can result in health issues. If the breeder is willing to share their care and their husbandry with you, that is a great sign, because it gives you the opportunity to kind of fact check them. If you've done your research and you know all about chameleon care, UVB, temperature, humidity, enclosure size, all that good stuff, then you're able to run those questions by the breeder and be like, well, what UVB bulb do you recommend? Is it a compact bulb, or is it going to be the T5 linear 6% UVB bulb that you're supposed to have? Their answers and willingness to give you answers will give you a good indication of whether or not they're a good breeder, because a good breeder will take the time, because they're also making sure that you, as the buyer, know what you're doing, right? And they want their chameleons to go to good homes. And then kind of going off of that, do they offer husbandry advice? You know, when you're buying the chameleon from a breeder, and if it's a good breeder, you're not just buying the animal, you're buying the relationship that you have with the breeder, their advice, their mentorship, their recommendations, their expertise. That all comes with the purchase of your chameleon, assuming you're buying from someone who's willing to give that to their buyers and future chameleon keepers. So see if they're offering to mentor you or share advice, or have they created care sheets that they can send to you? Do they have resources that they can pass along to you? Because it is a lot to ask, you know, a breeder to like talk to every single person one-on-one, but if they can at least point you in the right direction of some good resources, or you have one-off questions you can ask, that to me is a telltale sign that this breeder is invested in your success and your success with the animal. A very simple way to see if a breeder is good, is reputable, is to look up reviews. So I'm going to suggest that you go onto chameleonforums.com and just search for the breeder and see what other keepers have to say. Odds are, if they had a negative experience, there's a post about it. And if they had a positive experience, then you can read through that and see what breeders are being recommended from people who have firsthand experience. You can also check out things like their Facebook pages. Do they have a social media presence? Just be mindful that just because they're number one in the search results doesn't mean that they're a good breeder, right? You need to take these necessary steps to fact check and make sure that these reviews are legitimate. The price of the chameleon will also determine whether or not this breeder is for real, or if they're just trying to flip animals. A panther chameleon right now is going for around $500, give or take, and depending when you're watching this video, that price might change. but like look at what the average price for the species that you're looking for. So let's just take the panther chameleon for example. If average price is $500 and you find a panther chameleon for $100, you're like, oh my gosh, what a steal. But like, it's cheaper for a reason. You know, you get what you pay for when it comes to quality of the animal. Not to say the most expensive chameleon is going to be the best chameleon, because there's breeders who are on the other side of it where, in my opinion, they're overpriced for what their animals are. But I find that sweet spot price where this is kind of what the industry standard is, and stay within that range. That's going to tell you the quality of the breeder. If it's cheaper than that, there's a high likelihood that it's wild caught. It's a high likelihood that it's a sick animal. It's a high likelihood that the person's not, like, there's a reason for it. And keep in mind, you're also shopping with your dollar. The money that you're putting towards your chameleon is supporting a breeder who's helping the hobby grow in the right direction and is breeding healthy chameleons. That to me says a lot, right? Like, I'd rather give my money to someone who's doing it right versus just like cutting corners and cutting costs. What's a little fishy is when breeders or places you're trying to buy a chameleon from don't send you pictures of your specific animal. Like, any good breeder should be more than happy to send you pictures of your exact chameleon, the exact animal that you're getting. Should be no surprise what they look like when you receive them. That's also how you can make sure like the coloration's what you're looking for, they look healthy. Something that I know freaks some people out is the idea of shipping reptiles. I get a lot of questions around, hey, I'm trying to find someone local to me, and that's great. If you can tour their facility, if you can find someone local to you, that's amazing. But if you're in the middle of nowhere, like, it's gonna be really hard for you to find a chameleon. And odds are, if you want the reputable breeder, like, there's only so many people who meet that standard, and as a result, you may need to ship your chameleon in. So some things to consider is shipping is totally safe for the animal if done correctly, which again, this goes to tell you, like, is this a good breeder to buy from and what are their shipping best practices? A chameleon can easily be shipped overnight, but you want a breeder who's going to be checking the weather both on where they're at and then where you are. If you live somewhere where it's 2 degrees Fahrenheit, probably not a good time to be shipping a chameleon. And if it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit, probably not a good time to be shipping a chameleon. So a good breeder should be doing their due diligence and making sure the weather window is appropriate for the chameleon and that you're going to be around to receive the animal. Like, I've heard of people, they were on vacation in this place that, like, I would not recommend, sent them their chameleon, and it was just like on their doorstep, and like obviously didn't make it because there was zero communication on when the animal should be sent. So just make sure that the breeder takes all the necessary precautions to make sure that your animal arrives safely. I also want to briefly touch on some red flags and things to look out for as, like, bad things when purchasing a chameleon. So you want to stay away from Facebook pages that are selling chameleons. Now, if it's a brand or a company that has a Facebook official page, and you can make sure that they also have a legitimate website and a legitimate corresponding social media accounts, that's fine. What I'm talking about is the people who steal my pictures off Instagram and pose as someone who has a chameleon that's available, and then they just ask for a deposit over like Facebook Messenger without actually sending you baby pictures or additional pictures to like verify that they do in fact have that animal. So I'm going to caution you to stay away from that. Additionally, any place or any website that's selling a plethora of different species, that to me is like a yellow-red flag, and a good chameleon breeder is going to specialize in just chameleons. That's their thing, that's what they're really good at, this is what they're known for, and like that's all they do. If you go to a website and it's got all kinds of different species, that to me is a little concerning. Also, if they have all kinds of different chameleon species that like you've never even heard of or are super, super rare, that to me could be a sign that they're wild caught chameleons and they're not being bred in captivity, and so as a result they're probably going to have underlying health issues. I'm also going to caution you from buying a reptile expo. More often than not, and this isn't everyone, but I've seen it a lot, there's a booth full of wild caught animals and one of them has to be a chameleon. Or it's a booth full of supplies and then they just happen to have veiled chameleons. like, unless you've researched the breeder or the vendor beforehand to make sure that they like have everything that we've just talked about, I would not buy from a reptile expo and instead go through some online breeder or someone else that you know you've gone through all the steps to like make sure they're legit. I've just seen way too many people go home with sleep chameleons from expos and it just doesn't end well. I hope this goes without saying, but places like Petco and PetSmart are not considered reputable breeders. They have very, very large facilities where they just breed tons and tons of animals, and as a result, those chameleons can have poor genetics, underlying health issues, and then they're typically kept under improper care. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for a chameleon. So that's my advice, tips and tricks, and things to look out for when you're looking for a good breeder for your chameleon. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave me questions or comments down below. Feel free to subscribe so you know when I post a new video. And you can follow Neptune and all my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. And if you guys have any advice or tips and tricks or any stories of places you've bought from that were super, super awesome or maybe not so great, please leave them down in the comment section. I would love to hear. I'm sure other keepers would love to hear, and then we can kind of learn from each other in our own experiences. I also have created a Patreon account, which is a great way for you to get early access to videos, behind the scenes content, Neptune the Chameleon stickers, discount on merch, live Q&A sessions with me, all that good stuff. So if you want to support the channel through that, I want to thank you in advance, and it really means a lot. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good day. Bye! Apollo, you're grabbing your own tail. That can't be very helpful. What are you doing? Well, as long as it works for you, it works for me.